You're listening to The Main Loop, a bi-weekly... No, it's not bi-weekly. You're listening to The Main Loop, a bi-monthly discussion about what goes into making games that are well-made, interesting, and most importantly, fun to play. This is episode 4.
Trying to hold my shit together right now.
Yeah, off to a great start. Hey, Stuart. Yeah, that was a great start. I had said that we're a bi-weekly podcast, which is not true. So, strong start.
I mean, who knows? Someone might listen to us twice a week.
I have noticed that this is our 4th episode, but every episode previously, there's like a few downloads of the new episode, and then triple that of whatever the previous episode was.
Well, that's
so
cool.
People are like, I hate this episode, but the one before was kind of nice.
Yeah. So it's like the exact opposite of like the new hotness.
Yeah, exactly. So we can plan on what's going on with your mic there?
Oh, sorry.
Is it brushing against your thick and steel wool like chest hair?
Let me I don't think so. Let me mute for a second.
You gonna go trim that?
Is that better?
I think it was just brushing against your magic carpet up there.
I think it was there's a little clip on the end of it that hit the computer, and it's like a $5 pair of headphones. So
your lapel clip.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this week we are talking all about exploration and open world games, specifically the rise of open world games in about the last probably 10 or 15 years. And this is an exciting topic because open world games are, if I'm reading this correctly, Stu, this is your favorite genre of games of all time.
Oh, I cannot get enough of this.
If you were on a desert island and could only have one type of game, it would be the most open, non-linear sandbox game possible. If I'm reading,
if I were literally by myself on a desert island, I would probably be having more fun than I would be if I were playing an open world game.
So this is not your cup of tea in particular.
Yeah, I don't know. I just never really got into them. I mean, I've tried playing a lot of the Zelda games, and like even that much openness, my mind's just like, well, this is fun. If I wanted to do things of my own decision, I would live life instead of play games.
So you need structure. You need someone telling you where to go and a clear objective, and this is what I do.
Yeah, I need someone holding my hand, just like walking me gently through a nice little adventure.
So you would love a game that is just like 40 hours of a tutorial intro where like every 2 steps you take, it pauses the game to tell you a new button that you have to push to do, like press X to jump, like do the thing that everybody knows in video games, but you would love an entire game of just handhold tutorials. Oh, you just jump. Let's pause to tell you that you can press jump again and double jump. Yes.
No, I also hate tutorials. So I hate the best of both worlds.
That would actually be...
I would play 40 hours of Super Mario Run.
That's fair.
I legit would do that.
I talked to a buddy at work today who told me that his girlfriend made him uninstall Super Mario Run on his iPad and iPhone because it has become an issue, and he just can't stop playing it and doing rallies for more Toad people.
Yeah, I love it. Just love that.
I think it's great. But anyways, on to our topic for today, which is open world and exploration in games. So we touched briefly on it in our intro, but it's been this interesting rise as games have progressed, and really as hardware and software became more and more capable. That's how we saw the world of games become more and more open. And so I can think of, you mentioned like The Legend of Zelda, which was extremely groundbreaking Ground Blaking. It
Blake Grounding, I think that's his name, right? It's the designer.
Yeah, that's who that phrase originated from, was Blake Grounding. It was groundbreaking on the NES, which, as a total aside, do you say NES or NES?
NES.
I hear lots of people say the NES, and then the follow-up was the SNES. And I've always said either the Super Nintendo, sometimes the Super NES, but to me it's always just Super Nintendo.
I assume these are the same people who say GIF.
Oh, like an animated GIF?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it's. I should refresh my memory and see if it's all English persons, Britons, with an O.
No, it's the NES.
Yeah, because it's an acronym for the Nintendo Entertainment System. That's how I've always said it.
Well, mostly because NES sounds dumb.
Playing my NES.
I'm gonna take a hot take there.
Quoted. But so a game like The Legend of Zelda comes along at a time when, just after the Atari era, when video games were nothing more than last as long and get as many points as possible, right? And then you have a game like The Legend of Zelda where you have really no idea where you're supposed to go starting out, so you just start exploring through all these different screens until you start to kind of find your way through this game. And then again, as the hardware becomes more capable, you have games like Metroid and then Super Metroid, which again were a very nonlinear experience. You could do the levels in different orders and find different secrets and different things to do. And then to me, the first sort of open world experience that I can think of is actually The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time on the Nintendo 64. That was the first time that it really felt like, boy, I'm not being told exactly where to go right now. And I've got this great open area, stepping out into Hyrule Field for the first time. And I can just kind of go explore these different zones, and I might find my way back and the game will help me, which I want to talk about later. But games became more and more open. And then we had things like Grand Theft Auto, where you have this sort of sandbox element where now, sure, there's plot things you can do. There's a storyline you can play through, or you can spend all of your hours in this game doing nothing or doing whatever you feel like.
Or building a variant where you have Super Mario inside of Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah, you can start modding it. Or even games like Skyrim where, yeah, there's a storyline, but you can have thousands of hours logged without even really touching the main storyline, just exploring and gathering and crafting. And so I would like to get...
For a fun prediction while we're talking about Skyrim is going to be the first video game I predict to be playable on your Samsung refrigerator.
Oh, we
so
talked
while
about
you're
the
getting
Samsung
your milk,
fridge.
you can kill some dragons.
Man, if there were something like that on a fridge, I would... Well, all of our food would get rotten because I'd be standing there with the fridge. They would have to make it so that you can't play it with the door open. That's your reward for remembering to close the refrigerator, is that you get to play Skyrim on your fridge for a few minutes. And then it has to pop up reminders like, are you feeding your children right now?
Or yourself, really.
Yeah.
Either of the above. But anyway, we digress.
Yeah, so when I brought up the idea of talking about open world games, your immediate response was, and I quote, "I hate open world games." And so yeah. I would like to dive in more from just the visceral, but also what about them makes you feel bad? Like why are they not fun? Because ultimately games should be fun. And so I'd love to know what's not fun about open world games for you, because I'd like to talk about what's fun for me and also what's not fun for me about them.
Yeah, and I think this is really cool because it's one of the first times I've seen us really disagree about a game type. So it's not like we're just kind of sitting here being like, "Oh yes, great point, Sean. Oh yes, great point, Stuart." So we can actually be like, "Oh hey, we disagree about things." So that's cool. So like Pokemon is like the limit of open worldness, and I realize there's probably just like a slew of people who, if they heard that, would just like faint because obviously Pokemon isn't really an open world game, but like that's the level that I get to. So I probably have like two main driving factors for me personally as a game player. The first one would be solving puzzles. I really really like puzzles, and I like being a part of a story. And so when I say being a part of a story, I really enjoy playing out a plot that has kind of been predetermined or like roughly determined for me that I get to kind of interact with, not necessarily one that I'm generating on my own. What's kind of interesting, what I thought is I was like getting prepped for the podcast today. The type of exploration that really I dig into is like the exploration you find in Magic the Gathering, where it's like new sets of cards coming out all the time that you get to kind of like puzzle out what interesting things you can do with them, and not necessarily you have this huge expanse of places to go and like just to figure out what to do there. Because that I get bored or I get lost, and then I'm just not sure where to go next, and I kind of just give up at that point.
Okay. And so that's more the discovery of mechanics, the discovery of what's going to happen when I do this thing, what's going to occur, like what's this going to take me down? If I'm hearing that correctly.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. I'm not like interested in looking for. I'm not interested in wandering. That part of games just doesn't excite me.
So, have there been any games like Zelda or things like that that had elements that you enjoyed, or that had, I don't know, sections of exploration that you found fun?
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely parts of like the Assassin's Creed things that like, climbing and doing those various actions are really cool. And I really enjoy all those parts. And I mean, I think that's a crucial component to open world, is like you're going wide instead of going deep, right? So like if you talk about platformers and you talk about something like Yoshi or Mario, in that sense, a lot of the fun comes from playing through the same level over and over to try to like find new layers, collect all the components, and like figure out interesting ways that the designer is playing with your brain.
Yeah, I was just playing Super Mario World with a friend of mine, and that's one of my favorite games, but I especially love that there are so many levels that have 2 or more exits, and getting a different exit is actually going to open up a different area of the map. And the first time you find that out, the first time you stumble upon the key and the keyhole that takes you somewhere you didn't expect, like that was such a fun experience as a kid, going, oh my gosh, there's levels that I did not end up where I wanted to go. Like this level actually took me to a place I wasn't expecting and didn't even know I could go. And then trying to find out all the other ways that where else am I going to go that I'm not supposed to.
Yeah, whereas I feel like the excitement about open world games is like how many different things can I do, and like I want to find them all and I want to experience them all. And that's just something that doesn't drive me as much. I like, whatever quirk in my brain, that's just not like something that I'm like, oh yeah, this is awesome. This is something I want to figure out.
So when I play games that are more open world games like Skyrim, or I recently started playing back through Fallout New Vegas, which is one of my favorite games. I have this tendency where it doesn't get fun for me because just like you described, I feel like I need to do everything. I need to complete every quest. I need to find every location. And that was always a struggle for me because I would log hundreds of hours into a game and I've still never completed the main storyline on Skyrim or on Fallout New Vegas. Like I've just never gotten all the way through it because I get so sidetracked kind of in the weeds trying to get through everything. I feel like I've got to see everything because this world is so big and so wide open. And the fun for me actually tends to come when I just end up, which is I guess the promise of an open world game is you kind of make your own path. The problem is you end up taking the same path everyone else takes because you're trying to get 100% completion. Whereas I really enjoy it more when, if there's a quest I can skip, maybe I'm just going to skip it because I want to find my own way there. Yeah, does that make sense? There's kind of this, like, there's almost this tension between wanting to find everything, but also wanting to not have to.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's a really interesting way to put it. Like it's something that's not open to you in other forms of games, right? Like when you're playing League of Legends, right? Like, you can explore the jungle if you want, but like
if you want to be a terrible League of Legends player, you can just kind of wander around and explore everything.
Right. There's a certain amount of on rails that you are.
Yeah.
And I think what an open world game's promise is something that's a little bit more akin to free play, right? That it's like,
yeah,
these are some cool constraints we gave you, but everything else is kind of up to you, and you get to really craft the experience that you want out of this.
Yeah. I can think of playing Grand Theft Auto Vice City with a friend of mine when we were younger, when that was a new game and the PlayStation 2 was still the hotness. And I didn't even learn, it was years later that I learned that there were even like quests and missions in Grand Theft Auto, because all we were doing was like setting up the different stunt like achievements you can try to get. So it's like, oh, obviously if I drive my car really fast at this thing, something crazy is going to happen. And so we would just do that and just drive around, not even do the crime aspect, just the driving around, trying to find new areas and new, again, like stunt things that were going to happen. That was a really enjoyable. I mean, that was a great way to kill hours and hours and hours into the night just driving and exploring that city. And yeah, I didn't even know there was any kind of progression in there. And I think some games can kind of go too far that way, like that. Like the developers poured all this time into these missions and these stories and dialogue options and characters that nobody's ever going to see, because the open sandboxy part is just so fun and engaging. Versus something like Fallout, where it's more, yeah, you can explore, but it's not like, there's not any non-quest related things that you're really going to discover. You might discover quests you didn't know about and subplots you didn't know about, but you're not just going to find a place where, ooh, I'm going to go like have fun doing this mechanical, physical thing. And part of that is because Bethesda's physics are often terrible. But does that make sense? I feel like I'm rambling.
It definitely does. I mean, I think, at least from what I've seen kind of on the sidelines, open world has developed into a very sort of nuanced thing, right? Where it's not just like, oh, I'm an open world game. You have your open world of Zelda, and you have your open world of, like Fallout, and then you have your open world of like, Skyrim, where Skyrim is like very, very open-ended, and like Fallout and Zelda are much more like, well, here's some stuff you want to do, and this is like a path you want to take. And Zelda's more like, well, there's some checkpoints you have to hit, and the game will progress in order of those checkpoints, but you can take as long or as short as you want to get to each of them.
Yeah. That's actually one of my favorite things to think about in games. And I try to think about this every time I replay through the Ocarina of Time, which is about yearly. But I love seeing how the game kind of keeps you in play, because you could just wander around aimlessly forever, right? And you could go find zones that maybe the plot doesn't quite want you to be there yet. And so the game has to account for that. The game has to account for you wandering over to an area that's accessible, but that's not relevant yet. And it has to do something about that. It has to somehow lead you back to where you're supposed to go. And so I love, even though I know that game pretty well, like I could probably right now write down most of how to get through that game just from memory. I really enjoy letting the game lead me back through. Like, okay, I know I'm supposed to go here to get the sword, but if I didn't know that, how would the game tell me to go there to find the sword? And I really enjoy that aspect of like, how are the developers leading me there? And are they on the hand-holding side? Or are they too far on the free reign side? Like, do you see what I'm getting at? Like, it's a really fun thing to understand. Like how is the game teaching me how to play it and where to go?
Yeah, that actually reminds me of I'm playing through Pokemon Moon right now, and Pokemon is probably the most ham-handed I've ever seen at like telling you that.
Right, because there'll just be a guy like, you're not allowed to go here right now. The bridge is out.
Yeah, and in the current version, there's like a Tauros that's just like sitting on a road, and it's like you can't pass it. I'm
Yeah,
like, but
yeah, that's
there's
how Snorlax was in the originals.
like, but there's all the space to the left and the right.
No.
Nope, sorry.
Nope.
Oh, I have to go get that candy you're not telling about. Got
Exactly,
it.
exactly. There's something I don't know yet that's going to let me. And that can be really frustrating when you know that there's something that's going to let me get past this, but the game's not telling me. Like you're holding out on me here.
Yeah, and I think that's like the moment that always scares me the most about playing an open world game, where it's like getting lost and not being able to get back to the place I need to go. And I think that's something that for a certain type of person is like really exciting, because it means you get to sort of have that moment of discovery.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like there's kind of an axis of like the left to right would be like on rails to like completely open, and the up down axis would be like linear to non-linear. And then there's all these dots, you know. I think of like Fallout. The Fallout series is more linear. Like there is a clear storyline that it's leading you through, but it's very open. Like you can really meander and wander. Zelda is more, it's very linear. It's kind of in the middle, versus something like Pokemon, which is pretty on rails, but also pretty non-linear. Like you can, again, kind of meander around, and kind of do stuff. And I don't know. Yeah, it is kind of a loaded term, open world these days. Like, what does that even mean? I think of my real first experience with a game like this was Ultima Underworld, which was this really old PC game, and of course the stalwart Ultima series of role-playing games. But Ultima Underworld was just a game that really, I mean, it completely blew my mind, because the game has you get dropped into the underworld, which is this giant dungeon. I mean, it's this labyrinthine underground dungeon that has all these levels, and you get locked in and you start at the entrance. And then from there, you just have to go start exploring. And you have a map, and the map, you could actually like write notes on the map as you went along. Like as you went along, the map would become more and more revealed. And you would have to actually write notes, like this is where this guy was, or there's lava here, don't go there. And it blew my mind, because here was this game that you could just spend hours, again, ignoring the main storyline and just wandering around and finding new areas of this dungeon and finding new loot and new monsters. And you needed to be saving like crazy, because who knew what was going to happen. So I don't know. It was just such a new experience for me, having grown up on purely Nintendo, which was purely linear, platforming games. You run to the right until there's no more right to go to. So this was a pretty shocking thing for me. And then obviously things like Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time started to really kind of kick the doors out. And then where we are now with like the Batman Arkham series, Grand Theft Auto, the Fallout series, it's just insane where, yeah, like you said, it can actually be kind of daunting and even not fun, because it's like, well, what is the point of this? Like I get in here and there's so much to do that there's nothing to do.
Yeah, but I think what's kind of interesting, from a sort of bystander, more designy perspective, you're seeing different teams come up with different ways to attract and retain audiences. So like Destiny is a game that comes to mind, to where like it's open world in the sense that like there's no plot, there's no storyline, right? But it's incredibly linear in the sense that like you're not really doing much outside of like hitting dungeons, defeating bosses, and collecting loot, right? So it's like very open in the sense of like there's no story, but it's very closed in the sense of like there's one sort of dominant interaction pattern. And I know a lot of people probably wouldn't consider that open world, but I like the term open world in terms of grouping it more loosely, so that we can just sort of see those relationships between similar games.
Right. Yeah. And again, when I think of open world, I think of really anything that's nonlinear, that you can explore and really reach a lot of different areas. You're not just going zone to zone. It's not a first person shooter where this is the zone you're in, and once you clear it, you'll be taken to the next zone.
Right.
So I don't know the thing, because I do tend to love open world games, but the problem is, like I said, I want to be a completionist, and sometimes I'm just like, I want to feel some sense of progression. Like I'd rather go play a Heroes of the Storm match because I'm going to gain levels, and at the end of it I'm going to win or lose, and it's this self-contained experience versus I just spent 3 hours playing this open world game and I don't feel like I did anything. There's that, like, whether it's a dopamine hit, whatever that, I don't know what the brain drug of progression is, but sometimes it can be frustrating with a really open game because you're like, I want the progression. I want the running right until I reach the end and I hit all the guys. Like, I want that feeling, that sense of accomplishment.
Yeah. What's interesting, I think, for me is that I really like sort of in between both of those. So, right, like Temple Run is like really boring to me because it's like super on rails, nothing is happening. But then so is like even something like Wind Waker, which is like very fun and has a ton of really cool interaction points in it.
Yeah.
Right, where I'm like, you're like fighting monsters and figuring out puzzles, but like in between those spaces, I get really bored with the game. Because what really interests me is like the mechanics of the game and like chewing on those and crunching through them and like figuring out what makes them fun and why they're cool. And so I like things right in that sweet spot between like super open where I get to make my own decisions and then like super closed where it's like, so you just want me to figure out how to click a button more effectively,
right?
And then like I'm done? Question mark.
Yeah, it's being told do this action, and do it enough times until the game tells you that you've done it enough times, versus there's a truck over there and it's in your way and you need to find things and you need to find stuff in your environment that's going to enable you to move it out of the way. That's a terrible example. I'm not thinking of a specific game, but that idea of you've got to figure out how to proceed from here, and we're not really going to give you that much other than you need to rely on up to this point we've given you everything you need to be able to overcome this task.
Yeah, I think what this is kind of making me realize is like once I'm in sort of a quote unquote dungeon, I really enjoy myself, right? Like,
yeah,
okay, there's all these dudes to beat and like I have to figure out what's going on and solve this puzzle,
right?
But it's like the parts of open world that like really don't excite me are like, okay, I finished the dungeon, now where do I go next? And I know for some people that's like a huge exciting factor, right? Like trying to figure that out is really cool.
Yeah.
And that's just something that as a game player I really struggle with.
So like an open world RPG is not the game for you, versus more of just an adventure game. Like, yeah, you need to get to this area, and then once you're there, like you said, like to me, a Zelda game is a perfect example of that. Like, you need to figure out how to get to the next area, but then once you're in there, once you're in the temple, it's simply a matter of figuring out its puzzles, its particular like mechanics, its niche, and then defeating all the enemies in it.
Oh yeah, I love that part. Yeah.
Okay. Gosh, I mean, then you go even more open in things like an MMO, like World of Warcraft or EverQuest and some of those things. But I guess to me, those actually feel less open because you just keep doing the same thing. There's a person with an exclamation mark on their head. Oh, they need me to go to this place and collect 50 of this thing and then bring it back to them. Great, I did that and now I got XP. And that's like the grindy aspects of something like that aren't as fun. Versus something to me like I think of the Batman Arkham series, which I loved, especially Arkham City and Arkham Knight, which was really, you just go be Batman and wander around the city and you're finding things. Arkham Knight especially was great. I mean, there was like this whole subplot where there's these weird like mutilated bodies and you kind of have to like figure out like the particular mutilation and like things about the like, I mean, and you never knew where you were going to find the next one. And so you would just be wandering around and kind of hear this creepy music and then go find the thing and try to track down the killer. And I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed that amount of the wandering. Especially, I tend to be more of a wanderer in games anyway. Like, I'm like, let's go see what's over here. And so I guess I'm almost on the opposite end. Like, I enjoy the wandering quite a bit.
And the other thing, sort of, when you were talking about MMOs, is like, I feel like there's an important part to open world that is almost like antisocial, to where like something like an Eve or even like a World of Warcraft, you're really defined by like the relationships you build with other people. Whereas like I feel like in a more traditional open world, like an Arkham game or Fallout, or like even a Zelda game, the excitement is that you're kind of like unbound from like social restrictions, and you get to just kind of do things on your own.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important part that we've kind of been hinting at in a few different places, right? Where like wandering is about being alone.
Yeah. Yeah, and seeing what, I mean, the things I enjoy about the Fallout games are, I mean, I kind of just like post-apocalyptic stuff, but it's that I enjoy thinking about wandering around the wasteland and what would I be doing here? I mean, we could have a whole episode about just themes of like survival and like shelter in games, but yeah, I really just enjoy the wandering around the world, and again, kind of poking around in abandoned buildings and finding some stuff and finding a good place to sleep. And that's the part of open worlds I like, is that ability to just kind of almost zone out and detach and just kind of put myself into a low stress, a post-apocalyptic wasteland where I'm being hunted by raiders and have to shoot them all. It's very relaxing to me.
Well, that's actually really interesting that you mentioned that, because that was actually the exact thing I was thinking about while I was playing Yoshi's Woolly World.
Oh yeah,
which is very, very similar.
It's a really dark. It's a really dark take on the Yoshi story.
Yeah, all the yarn and the fuzz, just like really edgy. I think. Is wool edgy. Yep. But it's just like, beating a particular level was not hard for me for the most part.
Yeah.
Although the times it was, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to call myself a video gamer. But like, it wasn't hard. Like, no one would be like, oh yeah, this is a challenging game. But it was really fun to be able to just like complete a level and enjoy, playing a platformer. And that like has similar themes to what you're talking about, of just like, it's not exploration in the sense of like, I don't really have much control over where I can go.
Yeah.
But it is kind of exploration in the sense of like, I can just kind of derp around this place for a little while and not really worry about, having to like solve puzzles.
Right. Well, and I think, exploration is so key when we talk about these open world games and why they have appeal. I mean, gosh, think of, I don't know if you've spent much time playing Red Dead Redemption, which I had to stop because it was so much wandering that I was just like, I'm never gonna get anything done in this game.
John's like, oh my God, there's so much wandering. I love it.
Yeah. So we talk a lot about
types of exploration.
Yeah, we talk a lot about exploration, and there's kind of, I feel like even that falls on kind of an axis for me. Not even an axis. That's a dumb way of saying it. There's two kinds of exploration that I think about that matter to me. There's what you touched on earlier, which is mechanical exploration. What's going to happen when I do this action? What is the reaction I get out of that? And how is that going to help me later on? And sometimes it's things like, can I jump and kind of sometimes get to areas I'm not supposed to get to? Or when I jump on enemies, what happens? Even I think of a great example is Mega Man X on the SNES, which the way you start the game is you, like, start doesn't work, the other buttons don't work, but Y is he shoots a little fireball and it goes across the word start, and congratulations, you've just learned the main mechanic of the game, which is pressing Y to shoot. And so and then you learn things like, oh, if I jump and I like hold against the wall, I slide down it, and it has a great way of teaching you all these mechanical things. So there's exploring like how the game works and how those skills are going to help. And then there's actual like world exploration. I can't think of a good word to go along with mechanical exploration, but maybe cartographical exploration.
Ooh, that's a good one. I like that. Makes us sound smart.
It does, except when I go cartographical exploration. and then look awkwardly around the room. But the idea of actually exploring a world, exploring an area and finding out what's over there, where can I go, where's safe, where's not so safe, where might be a good place to stash some stuff or come back, and are there places that I can like set up a shelter for myself, or what's just a cool looking place? You know, there's so many areas like in Skyrim or even in Fallout where it just looks cool. I just like going over to this area because it's cool and I want to go visit that area again. And so that's a really enjoyable thing for me. I like just exploring the world. Again, I could go on and on about playing Minecraft and just wandering around and watching pixelated blocky sunsets, but getting those two kinds of exploration, and I feel like you don't often have them both in the same game, because something like Fallout is, I mean, you shoot stuff. It's, you know, you walk around and you shoot stuff, and then there's the thing where you enter vats and you can kind of target things specifically, versus something like a platformer where there's a lot of mechanics that you need to understand, like how's the double jump work, how's the flutter jump, how about shooting eggs, how about using your tongue or using items and things like that. I don't know if any of that it made sense to you.
Yeah, it's like it's the difference between like figuring out what's inside of the box versus like figuring out where the box ends. Right. So like mechanics are like the stuff that's inside the box that you kind of want to like figure out how it works and what's going on. Whereas like, you know, figuring out the cartography, the snezography,
the snezograph,
is more about like, you know, just going until you hit a space where you can't do that thing anymore.
Yeah.
And I think those are two like very different, you know, parts of it. They're different elements to games that I think are super important. And I also think what's interesting about them is that success isn't measured by, in either case, like how competently you do something. It's about whether or not you figure it out at all.
Yeah.
You know, whereas
the
like
discovery is, that's where the reward comes in.
Yeah. Whereas like even in a, you know, in like a Heroes of the Storm or like a, you know, League of Legends, you know, doing something well is the reward. You're not really learning how to do something. You know, like you might learn a new combo, but if the combo isn't worth anything, the game's quickly going to like punish you for that. Like you're going to be the dude who's derping in the corner and everyone's like, what are you doing? We just lost the game. Whereas like in an RPG, in an open world, you know, doing the weird thing in a corner is like the fun of the game because you just figured out how to do that weird thing.
Cool. Well, I feel like that was a good discussion about open world games and what's maybe good or bad about them. I would love for you to distill down maybe two, like your two, this is what's great about open world games, and your two, this is what's terrible about them. Like give us the TLDR version.
Okay. The two terrible things are sometimes things can get repetitive in a way that you don't expect, because even though you're going to all these different locations, you're still doing the same thing when you're there. So like there being so much space is just masking the fact that you're not really doing much of anything. And then two would be for terrible things, you know, just not knowing what to do next and like missing some amazing nugget that a game designer put in because you just never saw it or never knew it were there. You know, and two amazing things about it are, you know, having the potential to find so many different incredible things that there's never a moment where you feel done with the game, and you always, you know, you can almost always have a fond memory of the game because you can always consider going back to it and seeing if there's just like one more thing that you didn't find.
Yeah.
And then two would be, you know, just kind of like the awesomeness that is wandering around and being in a low stress environment and getting to define what success means for yourself, and not having a game or a person define it for you.
Yeah. So I would say the awesome things are definitely that sense of self-determinism and self-determination. Like, I get to enter this world and decide the path I'm going to take, what order I'm going to do things in. Maybe there's quests that just sound boring and they're not related to the main storyline, and I'm just going to skip them. I'm not going to do them because they don't sound fun, or they don't sound like something that this character that I'm currently playing would do. And so that, again, that sense of self-direction, that autonomy is really enjoyable. And yeah, for me, it's just the wandering. It's if a developer can create a world that is just fun to be in, like Hyrule or New Vegas, or the Wastelands, or of course Skyrim is kind of the pinnacle right now. But it's just fun to go, again, wander around. It starts to become familiar, and it's almost like going back to a place that you've been over and over, and it's fun to just be, in that world and kind of see what the work of those developers has how it's paid off in making this a rewarding experience. The things that suck about it are you can not have any idea what to do. There can be, it's so, not even that, it's so overwhelming. There's so much to do that you don't have any idea what to do. Like you can easily get crushed under the completionist instinct, which is you need to complete all 5,000 quests and 1,600 hidden quests, and you need to find every unmarked location and every marked location and every piece of gear and all the secret gear. And there's just so much to do that it can just feel, you can feel like you're losing even at a game that doesn't have, like, the game doesn't keep score, but you still feel like you're losing at it. So that to me can be not fun. And then, boy, it can be, there's nothing worse than playing this huge open world that just the world isn't interesting. And if the world's not interesting, then you're just like, this is just a waste of time. Like, I want to get through it because I paid money or I read good things about it, but I don't want to come back in here. Like the Grand Theft Auto game. Yeah.
Still waiting for the thing that you think might be there.
I'm still here and I'm just still not enjoying being here. So yeah, that can be tough. Yeah, well, I think this was a good discussion about open world games.
Anyone who says otherwise is just wrong. So,
I'd be curious to hear any listener feedback. We have an email address now.
Woo!
Yeah, it's mainloopshow@gmail.com. So you can send us your thoughts and feedback, topic ideas, requests, any of that kind of stuff. Stu, what's going on with you? How is Stu's 52?
Yeah, so I've written 2 reviews now. One is for Guild of Dungeoneering, which I think I talked about on the show, and one is for Mini Metro.
Okay.
So that was kind of cool. Coming up, I'm actually going to review or sort of dig into an iOS port of a board game, kind of talk about like what that means and what that does, called Lords of Waterdeep. Pretty excited about that. Recently, I've been playing Yoshi's Woolly World and feeling like a horribly incompetent gamer whenever I can't beat the level. But that's been a fun, peaceful thing. I've also been playing a little bit of Pokemon Moon, and then I started Never Alone, which is another platformer, because apparently I just have a huge platformer obsession. It's
weird. It's almost like we had an entire show where we talked about platforming.
It can't be true.
That sounds made up.
It's based on an Alaskan folktale, kind of. So pretty excited about that. Probably gonna do a review for that at some point. And you can find all of that at amateurmythology.wordpress.com.
Awesome. That's.
How about you, Sean?
That's great. So I, as I mentioned, have been any gaming time I've had recently has been pumped into Fallout New Vegas. I decided to start playing through that again. It might be my favorite game, actually, since we're talking about worlds that you want to keep going back to. I just really enjoy that game a lot. And there's actually one of the expansion packs. Gosh, that shows how old I am. I said expansion pack instead of DLC. One of the DLC add-ons for the game, Dead Money.
I think it's Dulk, actually.
Oh, one of the Dulks. just that DLC alone was one of the favorite like gaming experiences I ever had, because you get trapped in this like this casino that's like hidden. It's like a resort casino that's hidden somewhere in the wasteland, like nobody can find it, and you lose all of your equipment at the beginning of it. So it really is like a standalone game, and it was just so well done. So I'm excited to get back to that point. And I'm skipping lots of quests, and I'm taking just the talents and stuff that sound fun to me rather than like the min-max. These are the best things to take. So that's been really enjoyable. Coming up this Saturday, and it'll be published next week. I'm actually going to be a guest host, a return guest host on Between the Cons, which is a podcast that I used to co-host. About comic books and games and movies and kind of pop culture stuff. So I'm going to be on that this week talking about the Super Mario Brothers movie, which is very exciting because that is one gigantic hot mess of a topic. And so I'm very excited about that. So I would encourage everyone to subscribe to Between the Cons and then look out for that episode. I believe it'll be either Monday or Thursday's episode next week.
Cool.
Yeah, so that should be a good time. So I'm excited about that. Other than that, I just turned 30. And what better way to, celebrate maturity and adulthood than by talking about video games and playing video games.
It's fine. We're millennials. We'll just never be mature. It's cool.
Right. It's great.
Even the next generation will be like, those millennials.
We are having a little get-together tomorrow night, and I'm thinking that excuse me, got a frog in my throat. My whole family has been sick for like a week and a half. But I'm thinking at the party tomorrow night that the GameCube is going to make an appearance. And probably some Soul Calibur 2 is going to get played.
Very nice.
It's been a long time, but I think it's been a long time coming
brings
to get
back some
back.
memories.
Doesn't it, though?
Oh, boy. I am very excited to get destroyed.
Awesome. Well, you can always find us on Twitter at The Main Loop. You can email us, mainloopshow@gmail.com, if you have any thoughts or feedback. You can find me on Twitter at Sean M. Bragg. And I think that's about it for today.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week. No, again, it's not bi-weekly. It's not every week.
Or weekly.
It's
monthly.
Hey, I want to blame the Sudafed, but I'm not on any anymore. So I think it's best if we just say, bye, everybody.
Ta-ta.